All right, this is Audrey from Fortitude and Flow. I'm live here with Heather Thorkelson, and we are going to be talking about how you can apply some really interesting principles that are sort of like truisms of the body and the mind, and how you can actually use these to benefit your business. And especially in an entrepreneurial space, there are certain things that we as entrepreneurs like to lean away from that actually might be beneficial to lean towards. So that's something that we're going to be talking about today. I'm still getting used to what I'm looking at, what I'm not looking at. So forgive me as I'm sort of orienting to all the technology stuff. But Heather, we had talked a little bit earlier about the benefits of boring and what that might look like. So why don't we just start there?
Yeah, absolutely. So of course, my area of expertise is business, right? As opposed to what yours is, which is more about the self and the body and the mind and that kind of thing. But of course, they're completely interconnected because, as I always like to say, contrary to popular belief, business is personal. There aren't two things, right? It's not business and personal. Business is personal. We know that more than ever these days, especially when we're talking about business owners who are solopreneurs or who are the actual service provider. People like yourself and myself, we provide a direct service that's one-on-one, that's personal, or one-to-many, but nevertheless that we're the starting point for that. So of course it's personal, right? Mm-hmm. And so these two things are intertwined. And this idea that boring is beneficial, I think, is something that I'm going to admit took me a really long time to come to terms with, because I'm a creative person. I'm a creative human being. I'm a creative business owner. I have 1,000,001 different ideas. I like to be busy. I really don't like things to become routine and boring. And so, of course, I'm going to run away. I'm going to run screaming from anything that seems boring or predictable or too structured, right? Mm-hmm. Because the minute I become bored with my own livelihood or my own personal routines, like taking like self-care, anything like that, it's just not going to happen anymore, right? I'm not going to do it anymore. So yeah, it's taken me a really long time to understand that boring can be good. And I think, we both have some interesting points of view on this, but from a business perspective, how's the best way to describe this? Maybe I'll use a personal anecdote.
Love personal anecdotes. Let's get right to the personal anecdotes. I love that.
Let's get right to the personal anecdotes. Yeah. So I started as a business consultant back in 2011, and the smart people created something predictable to put out into the universe. They created something that was recurring and predictable. It's not to say that you're not smart if you do something else, but I can see that there were people who back then were like, you know what? I need something that I can rinse and repeat, that I can build upon, that is recognizable by the masses, that is easily tied into my brand. And I've always been like, no. However, as we were talking about before, Audrey, before we started recording, the truth is that you and I, we both teach and advise and help people on the same thing over and over and over again, whether there's structure behind it or not, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea that I don't want to do something predictable because it's boring is actually just a really bad story that I'm telling myself. I could have made myself, my business life, a lot easier by putting some predictability or boring elements into my business earlier on that would have allowed me a more predictable income in the early days, and also a larger playing field to branch out beyond that. Right? So the idea of like structure and boring being mutually exclusive, or being intertwined, it's not true. You can have structure and not have a boring business. And I think the same goes for you. You can have structure in the way that you take care of yourself and not have it be boring and routine, right?
Totally. Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things that is actually helps us to create, so this is sort of the way my brain works around this sort of thing is one of the things that helps us to feel like more steady and more stable as humans in general is having some sort of predictability, like having something that's steady, something we can count on, something that we can look at and be like, this is a thing that's going to happen, which is why like this particular time period is a little bit crazy, because there's so many elements of unpredictability. So that just like, as we are as human beings, when we have predictability, when we have structure, it helps us to relax in general, right? It just helps us to be like, okay, I don't have to be using so much mental energy to try to figure out what's going to happen. And that's the reality, right? Is a lot of unpredictability requires mental energy. It requires you being on, because you're trying to pay attention to what's happening, or trying to, move with things as needed, all of that sort of stuff. So this makes complete sense in the context of a business, especially one that is, entrepreneurship is a daily, okay, let's see what's going to happen, right? Like we don't really, just the nature of entrepreneurship is so unpredictable. So, that's why I loved starting this conversation with you, because it was like, we were both kind of having we both have sort of similar experiences in our own businesses, where it's like, you do kind of just try things a lot in the beginning, like this and this and this and this and this. But like we're both, for instance, we both have written books, right? So we teach the same stuff enough that we could write a book about the same stuff, the stuff that we teach. So there are, patterns in the stuff we teach. There are patterns in the things that we find that work well for people. So it's like, right, okay, it would make sense to be able to have these predictable things, to have these structured things that we know work for people, and to somehow marry that into our entrepreneurial lives also, to help us be able to relax a little bit, and then also be able to sort of, jump out and pivot and change as we need to, because that's just the nature of business in general. But like, that's the sort of the thing that I found so fascinating about this. And then to reflect on, business also, it was like, oh, wow, this makes a lot of sense. And it also makes sense why, days that I'm not strong at creating structure. It's not one of my strengths. So those days that are kind of like, what am I doing today, tend to be the days that I'm most exhausted too, because I use a lot of mental energy just to try to like steer the ship.
Yeah, for sure. And, I've gotten, as I've sort of settled, because I was moving around a lot for many years, I was like full on digital nomad, sometimes whether I wanted to be or not. And now that I've kind of settled, I'm finding that there are things that are making my life so much easier, like meal planning. I know I sound like a total old lady, but I'm like, oh my God, meal planning is the fucking best. I have a husband who eats like for 5 people, is a giant Swedish guy, so like I gotta make massive amounts of food. Meal planning, amazing, right? Because if you don't, you're kind of always in that like, oh God, what do we make today? And do we have what we need in the fridge? And, same with working out. I'm like, if I don't know what to do, if I'm not, and I hate following workout plans. I don't work out very much, let's be honest. But when I do, I go through phases, and then I'm like, okay, I got to follow someone has to teach me some stuff. Because if I know that I've got like a 30-day workout plan by some lady online, I'll do it, Because like, if I have to think every day, like, okay, well, it's going to be leg day. I'm like, I don't know what the hell to do. It's not my area of expertise. So then I just don't do it, because it's like, you're constantly making decisions, right? So there's something there. There's like, the boringness of routine can be a huge benefit. It can really be a huge benefit. And the other thing is that when it comes to business, when it comes to the kind of thing that you and I do, where we're disseminating information, where we're helping people out, helping people find answers, sometimes giving advice, we forget that the stuff that is, it's not so much boring. It's just that for us, it's old news, right? Because at some point, when you get to the point where you're a business coach or what do you call yourself, Audrey?
I mean, I call myself a life coach is really the most accurate.
Life coach. Okay, great. So a business coach or a life coach, you're doing that because you have a level of expertise in it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's how you're making a living. So the things that for you are sort of beginner's mind are really advanced or new to a lot of people, right? And they need to hear that stuff, and they need to hear that stuff again and again, just like you and I are learning stuff now for where we want to be, and we need to hear it again and again before it clicks. So I sometimes look back at like stuff that I wrote when I was blogging weekly for 6 years with my old brand, Republic of Freedom.
Wow.
And I know, I can't believe I wrote that much, but It's painful, but it's good. It makes you a better writer, right?
Yeah.
I look back at stuff I wrote in 2013 and I'm like, hot dang, who wrote this? Like, what? This is really smart. And so I'm relearning my own lessons, you know?
Yep.
And I'm also realizing like that's going to be really useful to other people going through that stage right now. So why do I think that, oh, I don't want to talk about that anymore because it's like old news for me? Like, there's ways that you can, I think, and I know, based on all the people that I've worked with and based on how much I've seen this happening, that you can encapsulate this stuff, this sort of evergreen wisdom, let's say, and make it more accessible to people, like in the form of writing a book, right? You're like, well, I got 9 years of business wisdom. I'm going to put it all in one place and then there, right?
Yep.
But then my mind goes, yeah, but a book isn't boring. A book's cool. A book's interesting. It's hard to write, but it's good to write. It feels good. Then you can go out and promote it and you can talk about the concepts, da, da, da. And then I tell myself the story that, but a course is going to be boring. If I create a course, then I have to write a course. But that's also, it's BS. It's not true. Like, it's just the story that I'm telling myself, because the reality is I am going to create an adjacent course for the book content. And I know that it's going to be super helpful. And because I'm a creative person, I am going to make it interesting, you know, and I'm going to make the evolution of that content interesting. And the reason I'm saying this, and I'm talking about myself, is because I want anyone who's listening who's a creative business owner, or just a creative person with a side hustle, or a creative person who has projects, whatever, is that like, I want them to see themselves in what I'm saying in a way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I think one of the things that as you're describing this, and one of the things that really occurs to me as being an important takeaway here is that constantly cultivating that beginner's mindset around some of this stuff. One of the things that's been helpful for me to sort of, I'm like a body person, clearly. That's the stuff I do. And I have to like experience things again and again to remind myself. So one of the things that I've found helpful is to like do things that are new for me in order to remind myself of what it is to be starting something that you know nothing about, you know? So I'll try like a new workout that I'm like, oh my God, I don't have any of the muscles to do this thing, right? Like, wow, I don't know how to start this. And like remembering that, wow, like actually hearing the same thing over and over again is super helpful, because every time I hear it slightly differently. And then it reminds me, and then it's like, right, the things that this, you know, instructor is saying, she says every single time, like, it's still helpful for me to hear. Like the basics are important. Those solid things are important. And also during times that are collectively unpredictable, repeating stuff over and over again and hearing the same things over and over again is actually really helpful for our brains, because it's easy to get scattered, it's easy to get distracted, and it's easy to be like looking all over the place. So like having things that are the same to anchor on and hearing it over and over again. So that's just like another thing that I think we can be reminded right now as business owners and just people in general. You know, for myself, I've found that somebody needs to tell me something a couple of times right now before things really sink in. And I think that that's also a good reminder in the business piece too, that like audiences are going to have to hear that they're going to need to hear the same thing over and over again in order for it to actually land at all. You know, like a little sort of not direct sort of skating side is not going to hit somebody. It's going to go right by, you know, like, so anything that's clear, anything that's concise, anything that repeats is good for our brains, and it helps us to hone in on the thing that's important to focus on, because there are so many things to look at. Like to know and be repeating and focus on the same thing is super helpful. And I think I'm curious about your thoughts on, I have some thoughts in terms of like daily routines and that sort of stuff, but ways to create stability and structure without it becoming something that feels too rigid and constrictive. Because I think that that's the thing that I relate to, at least when it comes to creating structure and creating that stability, but then also me feeling like I'm not really built like that. Like I don't, that actually doesn't feel good to me. So like how to create enough structure and enough stability without feeling like it's stifling and like crushing, which are like really strong words, but that's how it feels to me as, you know, as me.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think one really important thing to remember is that nothing is permanent, right?
Yeah.
Nothing is permanent. And I know there were many years in the business world where people were creating courses and they were like lifetime access to all updates forever and ever until we all die. And I was just like, oh. And that freaked me out because I was like, oh, well, if I want to coursify my stuff, that means I have to like maintain it till I'm dead, you know, and like, that's not, exactly. I'm not interested in that, you know, sounds very boring to me. So I think structuring things and having that conversation with yourself in a way that's like, I'm going to do this for X amount of time, you know, and beyond that, we'll see, you know, beyond that, we'll see. So let me backtrack for a sec, because I think there's two sides of this. And this is both, I think, applicable to business and just on non-business stuff. Yeah. There's structure that makes your life easier, right? So like a scheduling system, right? Don't schedule appointments back and forth on email. That is really stupid. Get a scheduling system. No offense to anyone who's doing it by email right now, but seriously, get a scheduler. You know, get an online scheduler.
Like anywhere you can save your energy and save back and forth and save your brain space, a scheduler.
Save back and forth, yes. Like that's where we need structure. We need like figure out an easy way to meal plan. If you make appointments with people, get something that does the appointments for you and does all the time zone changes for you. Yeah. All the information is out there. All the platforms are out there. Just go onto Facebook, ask your friends what they use and pick the best one. Done. You know, make some decisions. And things that make it easier for you to do the stuff that you know you want to do, but you keep getting stymied in it. Like maybe it has to do with working out or doing yoga or something like that. Like find a way to game your system so that that's something that you know gets done. It's a non-negotiable part of your day, you know? Yeah. And then you want to make things as easy as possible to both rinse and repeat, but also to happen sort of organically as part of your day, or, you know, so that you're like, yeah, I don't know how else to say it. And I think the way that you identify those things is what do you find is really frustrating you because it's a lot of back and forth, or that you're constantly procrastinating and not doing it. Those things, there's probably some systematization that can be put in around them, and you will be so much happier on the other side. Because like right now, I have 2 businesses, so you can imagine how much of that kind of stuff I need in order to organize myself. Yeah. And like, if I didn't have that level of organization there, I would have fallen apart a long time ago. Yeah. So that's the one side. It's really about conserving your energy and getting things to work for you, right? Yes. Doing the work for you. Yep. And then the other side of things is, and this is a little bit more towards the business side of things, is to systematize some of the stuff that you put out there, right? So I'll give you an example. I used to do a sort of long back and forth intake with new clients that I knew I was going to work with for a long time. So sometimes that meant that I'd sit on a call with them for an hour and ask them a bunch of questions, which is like, that's a lot of energy. I'm an introvert. That's a big chunk of time. And then I'd be taking notes. It's very not efficient, or recording it, which I'd have to listen to later. Also not efficient. So, you know, I was doing these like weird things where I'd get them to send me an email and then I'd have to like find my email where they put their answers. It's ridiculous. So as I evolved in my business, I started using a type form or Google form. You can use whatever you want, but I was like, this is the master intake process. Everybody goes through the same one. It's the same questions because they're applicable to everybody. Yeah. And all the answers live in one place. And so like, if you're going to work with me, spend 3 hours and fill this thing out. I'll review it before we're starting our work together. And then I'm prepared. Done, right? I systematized that piece. And then the book, like we both wrote a book. I wrote a book because now, amazing, I can actually send that out to people. And if I know that they're really struggling with something like decision making or risk aversion or really getting attached to sunk costs or having boundaries issues, whatever, I can send them my book and be like, look, read this and then we'll talk. Or not the whole book, but read this section of the book. You know, like,
it's a quick read, guys. Just, you know, I had the blessing of being able to like sneak peek ahead of time, and it's an awesome read. So.
Oh, thank you. But you know, like it's just making things more simple. It's not about making things predictable and boring for your end user so much. Yeah, you want to have this information at hand so you can disseminate it in an easy way for the people that need it, because there's always going to be people that need the stuff that you teach, even if it's stuff you were teaching a long time ago or stuff that feels like beginner's mind to you. Where have you captured that? And how can you make it simple for people to access? Maybe it's a book, but that's a big that's a heady thing to take on. Maybe it's a short course. Maybe it's like a $99, 30-day course that you put together where there's like little baby steps where they walk through the thing that you need to teach and they really need to learn, right? It's a low cost, low barrier to entry, but it's still really valuable. That can become predictable income for you. So it's really about not making things boring, but like it sounds boring to creative people, but just creating that structure, creating that predictability so that you're not starting from scratch and doing all that work again and again and again.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love everything you said there. It makes complete sense. And something that I want to add, because I think that it's something that I've struggled with in the past, is, okay, here I am. I don't really have any structures in place, but now I have to learn new technology in order to put the thing in place. I have to, right? Like for me, sometimes the barrier to entry of creating structure has been like, great, I got to like learn a new platform, right? I got to learn how to use this scheduler, whatever. Something that I found actually to be super helpful for me is find somebody that knows it, get them to jump on Zoom with you and give you a little short tutorial. Like anytime I've learned something, I do best with some sort of person interaction. Like I can figure things out by myself, but if somebody actually walks me through it, I'm like, done. Like Heather actually, I had been interested in Superhuman, and Heather actually got me on board. And that's one of the brilliant things about their onboarding process is they actually have a human being that walks you through it. I just had a friend walk me through Asana in terms of how she uses her Kanban boards. And I was like, oh, now that I've seen somebody do it, it makes sense. Maybe that's not going to be possible for everybody to learn everything, but you know what, honestly, people are so generous with their time. And when people understand a platform, and especially if you've got, as a business owner, hopefully you've got a decent network to pull from, people are willing to be like, hey, give me 30 minutes. I'll just show you the most important thing you need to know about this thing. Boom, go. So that's something to know, is like, how do you learn things best? Like, do you need somebody to show you? Then like get over yourself and get somebody to teach you. Like if you can't do it yourself, if you won't do it yourself, then figure something else out, That's super important. And that's the same thing for me, for workouts. Like I will literally have a quick little text with a friend to be like, all right, 7:15, 30-minute workout, see you there. And like, we don't even interact with anybody, each other during the workout, but afterwards it's like, hey, great job, see you Wednesday or whatever. So I think that might be helpful, just knowing, as yourself, like what works the best. And then figuring out, I think for structures, for consistency, like what does it need to look like for you to show up for it on a regular basis? I think that sometimes we look at what everybody else does and we see like, well, that doesn't work for me, so then this doesn't apply to me. Well, maybe that's not necessarily true. Like for instance, I was having a conversation about newsletters recently, and my capacity for writing right now has been very low. So I haven't actually been able to like write a newsletter for a while, but I've been inserting podcasts. I've been recording meditations. I've been recording video, and I've been sending that out to people, and people are still engaging, and it seems like it's still serving people. So getting creative, like being able to show up and create that structure, and then adjusting that depending on like your capacity and what you can actually do and be consistent with on a regular basis, I think could also be a helpful thing too.
I think it's super helpful as well. And I think that look, if you don't show up, if you don't put your voice in the public sphere, and of course, in this case, we're talking more about the business side of things.
Yeah.
You rob people of the chance to experience what you have to say or to learn from you, right? And so I remember back when I was blogging weekly for that incredible 6 years. I don't know how I kept it up. But anyways,
Heather.
I know. There were times where I would like, the reason I say like, 6 years is because it was hard.
Yeah.
It was really hard because I wasn't writing fluff. I was writing stuff that was like from the heart. And I'm not a natural writer. I have to try really hard. And so I would write and I would send out the newsletter, and I would write and I would send out the newsletter. And sometimes like 2 or 3 months would go past and it would be like crickets. There would be no comments. There would be no, like nothing. And I'd be like, why the hell am I doing this? I'm spending so much time every week. I'm racking my brain. I'm sharing my deepest held wisdom. And like, I'm just getting crickets, you know, like, does this mean anything? What's the point? You know? And of course at that time, because my brand was great, but it wasn't aligned with the services that I was providing, I wasn't actually generating much income from it either, which was like even more frustrating.
That's the hard one, when there's a lot of output of energy, but there's not an equal reception of compensation for it. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I doing this for? You know?
Yeah. It's like, why am I killing myself doing this? You know? But then out of the blue, I'd get an email from someone and they'd be like, I can't even describe to you like what your post today did for me or whatever. It would be like something just like, you know, like I had a come to Jesus moment kind of thing. And I would be like, oh, I'm so happy. I can keep writing. I'm going to keep going. It's all good, you know? And so like the feedback loop, the point of that is the feedback loop is really important, right? And if you don't put yourself out there, you never get the chance to get into that feedback loop. So when we're talking about something like maybe creating a small course or whatever, that you're like, oh, well, how am I going to keep this up? What if I start getting really bored? The reality is that if you build it in a way that allows for people to interact or to feedback, you're probably going to see some kind of, well, you are going to see some kind of positive feedback, right? People are going to be like, oh, this is really helpful. It's really good. Like, I want to take it when you run it again or whatever, you know? And you're going to be like, oh, cool. This is helpful. Amazing. And like, that's why we do what we do, right? Yeah, we need to make an income, but we've chosen to help or to serve in the way that we do in order to help people. And when people start saying, you helped me, then it's like it builds on itself, right?
Yes.
And that's super important. Like the best way, aside from making money to live, the best way to like help yourself feel good about your life in the world is to be of service. It has the best payoff, right? So it's just that. It's like make sure that you're consistently putting yourself out there, and you will be able to stay the course when you start getting into that feedback loop of, hey, you really helped me.
Yes, totally. Yeah. So I think that there's so much, we've covered so much ground around this. And I think that we've really touched on, I mean, the whole conversation is just, I mean, like, I can relate to all of this. You know, I can relate to like the desire to do something novel, the desire to have some more structure, the desire to like get some systems in place, and the desire to be like, screw this, it's too complicated. So, I think maybe just to wrap things up, like, what would you say is your sort of like, if you could pick like one piece of advice for people who are like, okay, I know that this is something that I need to do, or I want to do, or it feels like it's time to do, like, but okay, so where do I start? Like, what would you say to them?
Baby steps. I know it sounds really boring, but honestly, that's my one thing. I'm going to go to two because that's how I roll. But the one thing is baby steps. So like, to take your example of like using a system like asana or however you say it.
I don't know how to pronounce that. Yeah. I
don't know.
Whatever.
So like what do you call it? A management,
project
I don't even know
tool? Maybe
project management tool. So like, let's say you're one step behind that. Like because you said, oh, if you know you want to use Asana, then find someone who can use it and get them to walk you through it on Zoom, right? And I'm like, yeah. But what about all the people who are like, well, Asana or a Basecamp or right? Like, that's where most people get stuck, right? Should I use Calendly or Acuity or this or that? Like, how many times do I see, literally daily, I see people on the internet going, which one should I use? So when I say baby steps to overcome that like overwhelm or procrastination on taking action, I mean like break it down into the tiniest little thing in the world. So maybe if you're trying to find your project management tool, your baby step one today is post in that group on Facebook, what project management tool is your favorite? Please only answer with pros and cons, if you can provide pros and cons, right? Like, don't just be like, I love Basecamp. That's not helpful.
Yep.
Why do you like Basecamp? What sucks about Basecamp? Tell me everything, right?
Yep.
So go somewhere where you know that brain power exists, because if you're in business, you're in a few groups, and ask, right? And that's it. That is it. You do not need to decide today. You just need to take that one baby step of asking the smart question, which is, tell me which one you like, tell me why, and tell me what you don't like. And that's going to get you to the next stage, right? Then you go through and you're like, okay, well, we're down to two options. I really don't know. And then you can make the next tiny baby step so that you can make the decision between those two. And then once you've made the decision, then the next tiny baby step is, hey, can someone jump on Zoom and walk me through this? Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So you're not like, oh my God, I have all this stuff to do to figure out how to use a project management tool. It's not that at all. It's just one thing. And then in 2 days or 3 days from now, one more thing. Like, that's literally how I run my entire life, because otherwise I would be crying underneath my desk right now.
First of all, yes. And I feel so validated, because I'm going to tell you the story of how I got to the asana decision. Okay. So baby steps, 100%, like, yes. This is like what I teach everybody, anything that I do, one-on-one work or just in general. It's like sustainable change comes from tiny baby steps, one step at a time. So the fact that you said that, I'm like, yes. And as you were describing the way that to, sort of figure out the tool, I will be full disclosure. This was me on Friday going, which one do I use? And like searching the internet, which is just, that will make you crazy, because there's just so much, right? So I'm like, who do I know that is like an organization? Who do I know that like is good at organization and is going to break it down for me in a really good way? Mm-hmm. I texted them and I was like, hey, I'm trying to figure out how to like organize these things. What do you do? What do you use? And like, how do you use it? And they were like, hey, well, this is what I do. You could use blah, 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 blah. Have you tried blah? And I was like, asana. And I was like, I have it. I don't really know if I like it. I was doing that whole like, is this the best thing? I don't know. And she was like, listen, I got 30 minutes. I want to do something, but it's nothing that's on my to-do list. Can I teach it to you? I was like, yes.
Nice.
Yes, you
nice.
can. So it actually ended up being out great for both of us, because she was like, I felt like I was of service, right? I could help somebody out, even though it wasn't on my to-do list. And I got to receive the teaching, and like, it worked out great for both of us. So awesome. I feel like super validated by your example, because I was like, yes,
that's awesome.
That's the way you do it. So I really appreciate this conversation. I feel like there are so many more we could have in the future around just entrepreneurship and being a human, and how to combine those two things in a way that doesn't make you crazy. If people want to follow your work or know more about what you do, or like actually be able to like fill out that awesome intake form that you've created, which is a whole other story on like how to create good experiences for your people. What's the best way to like follow you or learn about your stuff?
So they can go to heatherthorkelson.com, which is my website. They can also follow me on Instagram, which is @heatherthorkelson. That's where I tend to hang out. I'm trying to be more of a cool kid on LinkedIn. So you can search for me on there as well. Still learning. I'm actually having a call with someone tomorrow who knows LinkedIn really well, so they can tell me how I can get into the LinkedIn club.
Love it.
Right? I'm so excited, because I've been like blocked ever since. So, and also I currently have speaking of things that have a finite life, I have a pop-up podcast right now with two co-hosts, Thorkelson from Norway and Sonia Simone from the US, who was one of the co-founders of Copyblogger.
Oh my God, so amazing.
Oh, she's so cool. They're both so cool. It's called the Resilient Business Podcast. So you can look at it. You can look at it, or you can look for it on any of your favorite podcast platforms. But what I like about it, Audrey, is that it's a pop-up podcast. So none of us thought, let's just make a podcast that we're going to be beholden to forever and ever. We make a podcast that we keep on going until it's run its course, and then we bid adieu. And it's all about now, right? It's the Resilient Business Podcast. It's like, how do we get through now? How do we simplify? How do we remember that, like, however you're dealing with shit right now, totally fine, right? We're all good. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
I love this. Thank you so much. This was such an awesome conversation, and that podcast is going to be like lit. I'm so excited to listen to that. And everybody stay healthy, stay well, try these tips out. Let us know how they work for you. And if there's other conversations that you'd like to see me have with Heather, I'd be excited to have more conversations. And we'll see you around on the internets soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Bye.